So hello and welcome to another episode of Gratitude Speaks. I am Uncle Marty Marr, a man of many titles. I'm really blessed today to have a special guest here with us today, Governor Jack Matthews, as I like to call him. Not officially the governor yet. But yeah, we're really lucky today to have this interview and have some of Jack's time. We're going to jump right into it. So Gratitude Speaks, as most of our audience has now started to learn, only a couple episodes in. We specialize in communal living, recovery house, and using gratitude as a tool for happiness. So with that, we can jump right in and welcome Jack.
Hey, thank you for having me
on the show.
Uncle Marty. Marty Marr. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do today is really get an overview of your using story, to start with, because you had a long career,
right? Yes.
With use.
Correct. And an overview is an understatement, right?
Yeah.
Because yes, I used for a very long time, but to sum it up fast, but I'll go into it a little more. I heard someone else say one time that when I found drugs, they gave me wings to fly, and then took away the sky. Right. There was nowhere else to fly to in the end. Right. Drugs fixed that hole inside of me that I didn't even know was there. And it started at a very young age. It started with all the starter drugs, the recreational using and house parties. I grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Right. So it started out as a party. Right.
Yeah.
And the 70s. Right. And the party didn't end until 2011, which is my official, start date of recovery. So that's over 30 years of using, getting and using, right? I talked about the starter drugs, right? Drugs in the beginning, they were my friend, right? When my friends weren't around, when they were around and when they weren't around, because I did a lot of family stuff. So when I was first started using drugs just fixed that part of me that thought it was a void that I thought was from me missing my friends. And then it started to become a protective agent for me, right? The alcohol, because I'm sneaking doing it, and it's the only thing that's making me fit in at home, in school, right?
And for people that don't know you and that aren't from Maryland, maybe, because most of Maryland knows Jack, but
right.
You were in Baltimore City.
Born and raised in Baltimore City. I was born in April of 1964 at Sinai Hospital. Born and raised, grew up not far from there in the Liberty Heights, Park Heights quarter, Liberty Heights and Garrison, Baltimore City, Northwest Baltimore City, and I talked about the starter drugs, but I grew up and saw a lot of things, environmental influence leads us to a lot of different circumstances that we don't know while we're in it, right? While using drugs, marijuana and alcohol, I had a first opportunity to see someone someone walk up to somebody, pull out a gun and pretty much blow their head off, right? And
At what age?
I was 13.
13.
I was 13, about to turn 14. Vivid memory, because it was a pivotal time where me and several of my friends, because we used cigarettes, alcohol, and marijuana at that time. But when that happened, because of what we saw in the neighborhoods and the things we saw in our neighborhood, right, and the things that we saw in the news, we were afraid, right? And then being afraid, the alcohol, it's funny how this can trigger that memory. The alcohol and the marijuana didn't fix that fear. So we picked up pills and acid, Valiums and things like that, right? And it wouldn't be, and once you begin to start stuffing feelings or fixing them with something, right? You know how we talk about progressive, incurable, and potentially fatal if it's not arrested. To speed it up, over the next 30, 40 years, it went from the cigarettes and the alcohol and the pills and the marijuana to being in prison and meeting the one that would take me 30 years to hit my knees and say, I need some help from. And that was, I became an IV heroin user, cocaine user, methadone. I did all of MHMA.
It's hard for people that don't use drugs to really realize how the progression is a natural progression too.
Yes.
The family that you came from was a good, solid family. Your opportunities were in front of you, and that's not the way you went.
Right.
Because
well, sometimes we talk about how like the disease that I suffer from doesn't discriminate. And I can remember when I first came into recovery, years after being into recovery and getting a particular job, and I've done some step work, right? Me saying that I don't have any traumas, right? And I was blessed to have a therapist working with me, alongside me. And we did some, processing of some things, man. And I understand now that I had trauma from the time that I was 4 years old all the way. How can you go to prison your entire life and be in the streets of Baltimore City and go through the things that we go through and think you don't have any trauma, right?
That's a great point. The masks were so strong.
Yeah. So it takes individually, like for me, and this is going to tie right into communal living, right? It takes individually for me to isolate those situations, which is why we put a lot of stuff down with pen and paper, right? Isolate those situations and see how I was feeling them and what made, why was I always so afraid of stuff, right? Because all those traumatic incidences, right? It's not about the event. It's about how we respond to the event, right? And most of mine was fear, reclusion, isolation, you know what I mean? And I continued, that's where, tying it back into the progression, right? That's where the progression, because the more and more because the same events didn't affect my friends the same way that it affected me, right? Because they were able, if it was 8 of us, if it was 10 of us, 7 of those guys went on to have professional careers, grow up, as an adult and raise families and things like that. 2 are dead, and here I am. It took me 30 years to get to a point where I could work on the traumas, right? Isolate them and figure out why, or actually be able to pinpoint the progression with each traumatic, situation. Because once the disease got me isolated and alone, it allowed me to hit that point where, had I sought help, which I didn't for a really long time, I may have been able to stop the progression. It didn't have to go on for another 30 years, but I didn't understand that.
Yeah, and I didn't know there was help, right?
Me
like you hear some stuff, and thank God things are different today than they used to be. That there is more access to information.
Correct.
Some good, some bad, but there's more access to information. But there really wasn't back then. There really wasn't. Some shows you'd see AA, some neighborhoods you hear about AA, but there was not a lot of community outreach like there is today. So how would you, right? How would you, and even if it did look appealing, like to really turn over, because most of your relationship becomes, when you talk about isolation, most of the relationship building becomes with the drugs.
Correct.
And the getting and using and finding ways to get
that, we talk about that. We suffer from a disease which expresses itself, right, in antisocial ways, right? And when it's antisocial, means it has you alone. It makes detection, diagnosis, and treatment almost possible if you're diagnosing yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Come on. I had a thought, but I lost it.
So I really, I kind of want to give you the opportunity to talk about the fact that people probably know The Wire. Right. So to get a picture of what you're using and what it was like, your life around that time, it was probably pretty similar to The Wire.
Well, it is. My life was The Wire, right? I'm in West Baltimore. As a child, and I talked about some of my early childhood days. My father's brother was Proposition Joe, right?
Yes.
So, right, my uncle was, and I didn't know as a kid, right? The status of what that Proposition Joe meant. You know what I mean? As I grew older, I found out that it was because Proposition, he would make you a deal that you wouldn't refuse. I didn't say that.
Right, yeah.
And he was a hustler on the pool table, so he propositioned a lot of people out of a lot of stuff. But what that did for me, you talk about, this is why it's important for me to do when they say that the drug is just a symptom of our problem, I grew up not rich, not poor. I grew up I want to say we were poor, and then we went to middle class, and then there was him. You know, he would pick us up on Sundays, and I'm talking about when I'm 10 years old. And at that time, it was a Lincoln Continental silver bullet, right? You remember the DeLorean that was the chrome? Well, he had a Lincoln Continental like that back in the day, and he would pick us up, me, my sister, and my brother, right? And he would take us to these fancy restaurants one Sunday every month. And he, you talked about the structured family that I come from. My dad, everyone else in my family sold drugs, used drugs, and things like that on a high level. My dad was the one who did none of that, right? So, but he allowed his brother, to come get us and show, because he showed us some finer things in life that my parents couldn't. And as the older that I got, let's just say when I started my communal living, right, in the penal system of Baltimore, of the state of Maryland. First was Baltimore City, or I went through all the juvenile systems, communal living, right? But when I went into the adult prison system, it was like he had already sent word in that, right? And there's nothing you can do with an addict, right? Because I was already a full-blown addict before I put the heroin in me, right? There's nothing, when you give an addict like myself carte blanche to do anything to anyone, and they dare not touch you because of fear of retribution from the guy, right? That just took my disease to an entirely different new level, right? And that's not something I've talked a lot about. I really never talk about, but I'm clear how it affected the way that my disease will go. But even with that, I'll never forget with that very uncle, when my dad found out that I was injecting drugs, right? He sent me to my uncle, right? Proposition Joe, and I went to see him. He had this big fancy house, and I went in there and he sat me down and he had this long conversation with me, right? And he was telling me drugs. He gave me that slick Uncle street talk, right? But was dead serious, right? About how drugs are for suckers, and how we have, and this is important, we've never seen anybody, he was talking about them, there's no fellowships or any type of anonymous program. They've never seen anybody who start doing it, at a certain level, stop. So he was like, right.
I believe it too.
Right, me too. And that ties in, to not, you saying that there wasn't help. So he exposed me to some game, right? Because he taught me taught me how to hustle.
I'm sure it
taught me how to hustle
too, so
but he never put me in a drug gang.
Okay.
Right. Because of my father, and I had several cousins that were the same way, for years. But there would come times later on in life where I did get involved with the family and things like that. So I want to jump back to where you talked about we didn't know that there was any help because, one of those times I was about to go to prison, right? Because I've had 7 major incarcerations, right? You talk about communal living, where I had a judge in the Clarence Mitchell Courthouse in Baltimore City tell me, it was Judge Silvers, right? He said, Mr. Matthews, right? Looking at this, and this was in 1990, looking at this, right? I got clean. Came into recovery in 2011. Why don't you let us get you some help? Right? I'll never forget those words. And I was like, help? What do I need help for? All I got.
What did you think he meant? Did you know what he meant when he said
I really
help, or
didn't.
what did you think he meant?
I really didn't, because I had never known anyone who had been in treatment or anything for drugs, alcohol, or anything like that. So I didn't know what he meant. But what I heard was that you're trying to get in the way with my using. Right? Because, and once again, tying back to the family that I come from, once I get there in the prison system, right? Once I get to Hagerstown, Jessup, ECI, wherever I gotta go, right? The drugs will be there. Don't get into, all I gotta do is nurse this, get through this sickness until I get to my destination. So I didn't understand that then, but the opportunity was given to me because I was a victim when I came into recovery. I said, nobody wants to help me. The world's against me, right? Police, prosecutors, probation, and I'm here to tell you, because of staying here long enough, I understand and I get to tell individuals who were in the position that I was in way back then that know those people, when they were doing with their jobs, right, they were absolutely trying to help me save my life. And I just didn't understand it, and put me on a different trajectory so that the progression wouldn't take 30 years.
Yeah.
You know,
you told a story too at your anniversary one year about how you didn't end up going in prison the last time.
About how
You didn't go to prison.
Okay.
That the judge.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, okay.
So
And here we go again. Yes, I can tell that story, and this is something else I don't share a lot in the places that we be, right? But in the end, I was still selling a ton of heroin, right? Every day, right? And there was a team of 10 of us, right? And there was this big raid, right? The house I was living in, another house, which we call a stash house, and they grabbed all of us from on the block where we had, right? And in my mind, right, thinking that I had to be the one to step up, right? Because thinking I had to be the one to step up. I said, don't worry about it. I can take it. I'll take the charge for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? And y'all just take care of me while I'm gone, right?
Do you mind if he stays with us?
No, not at all. He'll bring rape.
I don't want to disrespect your story. It's a serious story.
Absolutely. So, they all knew it.
Yeah.
You know what the plan was.
And how many times had you gotten charges up to this point?
A lot. But none this serious
Yeah.
with distribution
And you were just ready to go.
Yes. And you got to remember this. I came into recovery at 47.
Yeah.
So I was 46 when this happened, right? So we go into this court.
So you really were expecting this to maybe be
that was life to me.
Your life.
Right. Absolutely.
Because by the time you get out,
I would be old and gray, right? And thinking that my friends gonna take care of me on this, whatever bit they give me. So we go into the courtroom, we all out on bail, and we continue to do what we do. And the court day comes, we all come there, we all have our attorneys and everything, and I'll say his name. It was Judge Paul Smith, right? Who was one of my father's Masonic Lodge brothers, right? I missed the part. We went to the courtroom where we were initially scheduled for, and they called all our attorneys up there, and they said, your case has been moved over to the old post office, which is across the street from Mitchell Courthouse.
Yeah.
So ain't nobody know what was going on, right? I'm talking about divine intervention, right? And this judge that I mentioned, Paul Smith, is retired. Was retired at that time, but he used to come back for special cases.
Yeah.
Right. And when we get in, when they walk us all into the courtroom, and I look up at the bench, I see him up there, and I said right then and there, right, that I hate to use these words, but that the fix is in. Right, not the fix, but that's the only word that, like, divine intervention. Here we go, and Jack, you better pay attention to what's going on. So we get there, and they call all of the attorneys to the bench, to the judge's bench.
Yeah.
And the judges talk for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe. And the attorneys come back, judge hit the gavel, and he said, case is dismissed. Everybody left the courtroom that day. Now, I need to tell you this also. I have never told any of them guys that was on that charge with me who that judge was. Not once, right?
And why is that? Because you were worried about him?
Right. I didn't want to upset his, stature or integrity, right? And it doesn't, and I've told him that, and he said it wouldn't have made a difference because something he found in the letter of the law that warranted that happen, right? So to further that story, so my recovery date is 8/8/11, right? So 9/12/12, my dad dies.
Oh, right.
Right. So when they had his funeral service at the Masonic Temple, and not only was that judge there, right, there were several other judges and prosecutors who were his Masonic lodge brothers who were there as well. And at that time, they saw that I was a different person, and they all individually had conversations with me, and some as a group as well, about how many times, without me even knowing, right, I was given chance and breaks, because like I said, I had 7 major incarcerations, but I should have been gone forever for all of the stuff that I got, because I always get caught.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were plenty of opportunities,
What's amazing to me is that having been caught and physically arrested and put in jail all those times, in prison all those times,
right,
and that's not what stopped you from using.
No,
you were actually let off, and given another chance, and that
however,
not being forced.
It didn't stop me from using, but it began to open my eyes.
Yes,
it began to open my eyes. I'll tell you another. Because it was a progression of getting out of that, man,
And the reason why I think it's important, and please don't forget where you're at. What I think is important about that is like, nobody can stop us from using if we don't want to stop.
Right. Nope.
Nobody.
Don't matter. Nope.
Don't matter how many times you lock us up.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to find a way if that's what we want.
That's right.
The same as the opposite. Mm-hmm. If we want to stop using, nobody can force us to use.
That's right. And
that
fits this situation perfectly.
Yeah.
Because I had to go through everything that I went through to get to where I am. You know what I mean? I love that. The same way that no one can make us stop using, once we get stopped, right? There's little, because I know my story, right? I know how to play the tape out. So there's little to much, I'd like to say nothing that can get to make me use.
You couldn't make me use. There's nothing you could do.
Exactly, right?
There's nothing you could do.
Drugs or alcohol.
Not a chance.
But it took a lot to get there. There was a situation where, I don't know if you've ever been to Baltimore City Jail, but, I had my communal living life, right? So like, this is how communal I was with Baltimore City Jail. Years before that arrest that we just talked about, probably 5 years before that, it was some years before that, where the police, we got raped, we got knocked off. It takes them, I had $100,000 bail. It takes the guys a little while to get me out, right? Like a week, right? So really.
Get a little cash.
Now, mind you, when you go into prison, into a jail like that, you go on for statute because everybody done heard, they got knocked off again, right? So after that week of getting out, I get out and go to the place where I had more drugs hidden, a lot more drugs. Mm-hmm. I grab the drugs, jump in the car, and I get 2 blocks away from the house, and they lock me right back up. Right? And I'm talking about, what the humiliation was, right, is they took me and charged me. Took me to Baltimore City Jail, and they put me right back in the exact same cell I had left out of. Meaning, like, I hadn't even been gone long enough to be taken out of the system, right? And to tie this into communal living, right? And you can probably pivot from here. I loved as a young teen. I'm talking about summer camp that my parents would send me to, where we would ride horses, and I would take pills because I was already using them, right?
Yeah.
I would take pills. Nobody knew. I would take cigarettes, right? Hiding in the woods, but I loved that in the dorm type feeling, right? Around people. I loved people. It's crazy that I loved people, but I loved to isolate around people, right? So I loved summer camp. And when I stole my teacher's cars a couple times in junior high school, and literally, right, Miss Giddings.
The events finally got me.
Right. Yeah. The first time I stole a car, I came up Bernard Avenue, boom, I hit every car. I thought you could just hold the wheel straight. So I did so much damage. The next couple of summers, I had to go to the training school, which is Charles Hickey Boys,
So is this the first experience that you had with communal living? Is that where you're taking
The
us?
camp was, right. The camp was, correct.
So rewind that. So I know you used to take summer vacations with the family.
Yeah.
So this would be a different.
Right. This was
later.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The last family we took some summer vacations when I was using 1 or 2 to Florida to visit my sister, but I was so caught up. My parents, you gotta remember we're talking about a 30-year gap where all that stopped. But yes, we took summer vacations pretty much, my whole elementary school, most of the way up. That's probably why we stopped, because I had to stop going through time during the summer.
Wow.
But what happened was, I talked about the camp, I talked about the Hickey. I like to fight, right? So when I got into Hickey, it was like every night a fight.
Wow.
Right? Somebody, me and somebody else, or some, you watch, and I'm talking about you can rumble in there, right? And that was like, oh my goodness, it was like you walk around feeling like the king of the world, because everybody like, don't mess with him, we can fight, right? And then you go to so we go from the camps to the training school, Montrose, Boys Village, Waxes, all that stuff. I'm going in, I'm loving. What dorm I'm going in? Because I love to be around people. Don't put me in the cell, And then we get to the men's prisons, and you got to understand when you go to prison in the state of Maryland, in the Division of Correction, like them dormitories got like 150 to 200 men in it. And it's like a city.
It is.
That's, and it's kill or be killed. But it's something like people like myself love to feed off of that type of thing, right? Because, you had different groups of people in there. You always had your group of people. And this is one of the biggest reasons, even in positive ways, but even in negative ways as well, right? Why I believe in communal living, because by myself, right? I'm not too strong, I'm weak, right? But when you put me with a group of people, right, even if it was out in the middle of the ocean, right, we stand a better chance of surviving, right? So that's my theory and my rationale for community living, right?
Beautiful.
Right. And when I was coming through the prison system, it was for an entirely different reason, for the reason I was kind of the same reasons, right? But just for different outcomes.
Sure.
Right? Just same reason, different outcomes, man. Communal living makes me a happy camper. I'm looking at you. It's, because no matter what's going on with me, I'm around people. If I'm in communal living, I'm around people who, for the most part, are trying to achieve the same goals that I'm trying to achieve, right? And we all trying to stay safe and, happy. And that doesn't mean that, and, let's just pivot off of happy, because you and I have lived in communal living together, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's take it to where we met.
Right.
At Mike and Joni's.
Well, yeah. And I don't know if you weren't there yet, but that's where it started. I mentioned my dad died. I think that happened before you got there, right? Yeah. Because, I was given, I went through a place.
No, wait. 12 of 14?
No, 9, 12,
9,
12.
9, 12, 12. Right. Yeah, that was right before
Right, before you got there, yeah. So, I was given some suggestions to go there. That was a long-term place, house, communal living place. Right?
How did you find that? How did you find out about
the same person I'm getting ready to talk about, James, our friend James Evans, right? Okay. We were all at the Howard House, one of the Turk House facilities, right?
Okay.
And, long-term 6-month treatment. So when James' 6 months was up there, one Saturday morning, and I remember the exact date, it was March the 9th, right? Of 2011, of 12,
got
right?
A great memory for
right.
dates.
Well, because he moved on my dad's birthday.
Gotcha.
Right. So that's easy to remember. Saturday morning, it was time for him to leave. We put his stuff in the back of Glenn Bacon's car. And I said, can I ride over to the house with you? And I rode over there and I looked at, you've seen that property, right? Mm-hmm. Remember, I'm from the concrete jungle, right? I looked at that house and I had the opportunity to meet a guy that would affect both of our lives, right? Immensely. I had a chance to meet Mike Elder, right? So that's how I ended up there. When I left there that day, I was like, wow. Because I didn't have a clue where my life was going. Remember, we were in Howard County. I'm from Baltimore City.
And you went right from prison, I'm assuming, to the Howard House.
From where?
How did you get into the Howard House?
From Shoemaker.
Right, from Shoemaker.
Right, yeah.
How did you get
my
into Shoemaker?
counselors, The van picked me up. Funny story. My dad put me out of his house in 1981.
Okay.
In 2011, I said, there's a van going to pick me up. Can I sleep here tonight? He said, no.
Wow.
But he said, you can sit on the steps and wait for him. So the van picked me up, took me to Shoemaker. I left Shoemaker after 28 days. They took me to the Howard House when Jamestown was to leave. And all that's communal living.
Yeah.
And all that affects, me.
Yeah.
And it affects my mind because by myself, I know what happens.
So let me ask you this too, because a lot of your story, you didn't say it this way directly, but a lot of it is affected by power and power structures and where you stand within a power structure or how you can work your way up to be at the top of the power structure. A lot of your story reflects that, almost as if you're just naturally magnetized into that position.
Well, it's funny you should say
How
that.
did you handle that as you were actually surrendering to a recovery program?
In the beginning, it was easy because I was able to, I shouldn't use the word easy. In the beginning, it was manageable because this had to work, right? I can
relate to that.
Right, it had to work. There were no other options. They asked me what did I want to do when I got out of that place, and I said, I don't know what I want to do because this is still my first attempt.
Yeah.
I said, but I know what I don't want to do.
That's it.
I don't want to go back to what I left, right? So, how did it work? I was so beaten and broken, right? And I had some examples of people, right, who were before me, right, who shared parts of their lives with me. And I was able to, we talk about a shot of hope, right? I was able to say, well, if it can work for them, just maybe it can work for me, right? And I began to thaw out a little bit, right? You also have to remember that I knew not one person when I came out here, right? So that kind of let me off of the hook for the moment, right? Before doing on the inside and trying to work on myself from having to feel like I had to show up a particular way. Remember, I'm used to walking into dormitories, putting my chest out, doing 1,000 push-ups and, showing up like that.
What a blessing.
Right.
You just got to,
just to be. Learn how to be me.
Just to be.
Right. Learn how to be that person that was going to the summer camps.
Yeah.
Right. Playing baseball at the church in the neighborhood and stuff like that. Right. Yeah. I had to and I had somebody tell me that I want you to, and this was in treatment. He said, I want you to start thinking back to when you were there. He actually came from around my way.
That's great advice.
He said, I want you to start thinking back to when we used to play baseball on the baseball field. Right.
So real quick, don't lose your place, but I actually have been talking about this with other people that work at Summit because we have beautiful properties and great treatment at all of our facilities, right? But one of them right now is in the city. And I see the difference in behaviors for the guys that live in the city versus that live in the county or outside the city. And my assumption of part of it is that when you're in the city, if you're getting great counseling inside the house, that's one thing. Right. But you still have to walk out the door and be tough. Yeah. You still have to be in the city. You got to protect yourself. You got to have that wall up. Yeah. And then you come back in. And there's more of that. It just seems like it's more difficult, even for we're running the same houses.
Listen to this.
Tell me.
Listen to this, because I talked about when I came out here, I didn't have to put the facade on, the male puffery thing, right, and be presented as the biggest and baddest and strongest in the room. And I did some work on myself, and I celebrated a couple of, anniversaries of years of recovery, and I got my first car. It's sometimes I have to pay attention to situations, because the things that happen with me and the way that I show up in situations, I don't even recognize them in the moment.
Yeah.
So when I got my first car, I'll never forget, I had a white Nike hat. I had a 2000 Sebring, right? So I'm going to visit my mother one Sunday because, that my dad was dead by then. So I'm living at the Donnelly house. I'm going to visit my mother. And I noticed, I don't know where this quiet moment came through, when I would come across Garrison Boulevard, I would open my sunroof and turn my head around backwards, right, and bump the music, because I want people
to change that ego.
Yeah, exactly. That's the subtleness, right? So the thing. One of the things that I had the ability to do when I came into recovery was to tell my sponsor everything. whether I thought it was significant or not. And there's something about when you got a good guide and he will point those things out. He said, Jack, that's because you want to show up. You feel, you back in the environment. That's why they said change people, places, and things.
I still do to this day.
Yep.
When I'm down in the city, you gotta toughen up, be ready. You gotta pay more attention. You gotta change.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lifetime of being in the heart of the city,
right.
But
and I do, and you started talking about people recovering in the city, right, and the difference, and I would have had to come out of that house if it was in the city and show up like that,
and you might
I
not
would have
even
a
know
wall
that there
up.
was a difference.
Exactly, right. This is what happened with that situation with the car. Because even if after I shared it with my sponsor, see, I would go straight up Forest Park to Garrison Boulevard and make the left, right? And I continue to do that. But there was 3 streets back was the street that take you to my mother's. So I bypassed that street every time just to go and let them see me, right? Blow the horn at a couple people, break my mother's cigarette hanging out the mouth a little bit. Until I kept sharing it with my sponsor. He said, why you keep going that way? And it never occurred to me, take the first turn, right? I didn't even have to go up there and be in that, you know what I mean? I can go there today if it was a need. Well, I went yesterday, I got my hair cut. My barbershop was there, but I'm in a different place. At first, Glenn Bacon took me for my first 2 years to get my hair cut. Never going anywhere alone, right? But let's jump back to that. And all this is tied into the power. Yeah. Right, because it seems like everywhere I went, like you said, there was, I always found myself, I always was the tear runner. I got a friend of ours, every time he celebrates, he said, come on up here and share tear runner. Let's do it. That's great. Because I always ascend, you know what I mean? House manager, tear runner, things like that.
Yeah.
So I had this thing in my life, right? In my recovery now, where most people don't understand it. The only person I really, besides my sponsor, talk to about it will be my wife, Jessica, right? Because she always, I shouldn't say always, she didn't understand in the first few situations where I could have flexed, for lack of better words, right? Why I don't. Yeah. Where I could have
that being your first reaction.
Right, because that's what I used to do. That's what usually got me through. However, I know, right, from the 4th step, what happens when I flex. Yeah. What happens when that comes out, right? The anger and the venom. I don't have the ability to stop, right? So it doesn't, is it worth satisfying my male ego for the first month, for a minute, and going to prison? Right, because that's where it's going to end up. Or I'm dead, somebody going to kill me or something. Or is it okay for me to just sit back, right? Use this, pause button, right? So power, there's a lot to be gained even living this way of life, right? But it's one of those things that doesn't benefit me. That doesn't mean that I don't still ascend want to, have dreams of ascending professionally and things like that, where I have to take chances and be aggressive in different ways. I'm learning how to do those in different ways.
Well, you're doing it in a lasting way.
Right.
Right. And that's really the difference between good, or bad, in my opinion. Most of it is based on what's lasting. Right. Because good is going to last forever. Good and something that's right can last, can sustain forever. For sure. Love can sustain forever. Fear cannot last forever.
And when you like us or like me, when men, and I'll say women potentially as well, when we come into the recovery environment and we're being taught to learn we're learning from our recovery process how to face the world with neither aggressiveness nor fear, like just be who we were always meant to be. Part of being in communal living, everyone is at different phases of their recovery. So everyone hasn't worked on that. So you talk about power because I was still placed in some positions of leadership and authority where had I not learned some different coping skills, right? Rather, we talk about defects and assets, right? Had I not turned that anger into happiness, had I not turned all those, other things and, love, peace, happiness, tolerance, patience with others, right? Instead of reacting like I did for so many years when I was in active addiction, right? That was one of the things that attracted me to some men who were before me, because I watched how they would include myself to handle me gently, and I was able to learn early on in recovery how to handle people gently and not use the strong, emotional, tearing you down type of tools or physical violence type of tool. And what that does is it makes the people who are in authority say, okay, I want you to lead, right? But it's something about leading with principle,
absolutely,
not with brute strength,
absolutely,
right? And that was something that I have to work on continuously in my life, because I'm still only one bad decision away.
Yeah.
Right. And anger is one of those things that can take any of us out at any given time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you one of the best pieces of advice that I heard was just try to make a different mistake, right?
Yeah,
you're probably still going to make mistakes, but just try to make a different mistake. And part of what you described was being able to give yourself enough time to try. If I don't react my first reaction, right, my first go-to old way with anger, and I sit back, what happens then? Right? In my mind, I go to the fear of, well, they're going to think I'm less than, or they're going to check me, or I'm not going to be able to, right? All those, and it could go on and on forever. But when I actually do it and I just sit and watch, turns out most of my problems actually go away, that there's no need for anything. There's most of the time, if I sit back and don't react with anger, then nothing happens. Everything's fine. Turns out there was no scenario in the first place that I needed to react with anger for.
You heard the story about the boy coming home from school. Every day he came home from school, he'd get to this particular block, and the dog would come running up the yard, chase him, and he'd run every day. And then one day he stopped, right? And the dog stopped and smiled, and they ain't had no teeth. The story of my life. Right, I was always running from something, right, and the danger was only perceived in my mind, right, So that was the story of my life, with always embodying, allowing fear to regulate what I was going to allow myself to do.
Yeah.
And I had to learn how to flip that. I had to learn how to trust people. And what better way to trust people than to live with them? When you get to live with an individual 24/7, for months and years, the ways.
So before we go there, real quick, I actually want to say how profound you having, because we're talking about subtle things, right? I mean, we're talking about profound things, but they're so subtle. The actual actions that we take to listen to other people, to let our guard down, to get into communal living, to use gratitude as a tool for happiness, right? These things that we're talking about, giving ourselves a chance to change out of our behavior and just recognizing our old behaviors, right? Just being able to see that you're behaving differently in one place versus another. That's a subtle thing. But what I want to say is it's very profound that you are here. Especially, I don't know if you've been looking at these New York Times articles that have been coming out of Baltimore.
Yeah.
The statistics for
you sent them to me, I believe.
For a black man your age, born between 51 and 71, the amount of deaths is so much more demographically, statistically higher than any other age range or race, and it is profound that what you're talking about literally is the difference of life and death.
Yes,
right?
For sure.
And I think that's important, not just for you and me to talk about, but maybe for the youth of Baltimore City to hear, right? That there is a different way. In fact, your life is amazing, Jack.
It is, man.
Like, you didn't just get clean and survive. Like, your life is amazing because of the choices that you made. And it's just a couple of different choices, right?
Yeah. Well, and every one of those choices involved having trust and going somewhere. Because every time I moved from house to house, right, there was a level of fear that kept wanting to pop up. Because I got to get comfortable with a whole new group of guys and get vulnerable and open, because I still need to be open and, honest with everybody around me. You know what I mean? So there was always a level of fear with that. So yes, what better? Yes, I have been blessed with a life that you can't imagine. right? So, one of the things I did yesterday, one of the things I do professionally, is go into a prison, right? And not only do treatment, but connect people to resources, like the Howard House and other places, you know what I mean? For when they get out to get some help with their problem, So I started my day off yesterday with interviewing a couple people, right? I was doing some assessments on them for potential long-term treatment if and when they get released, or will y'all send Bill Sachs to court with them or something like that. And I finished my day yesterday at the Perkins prison in Jessup, right? For the criminally insane. And there were 30 people in there last night. And I had the opportunity, it's like an out of the body experience, right? Because we're going back to hope, and they in communal living, right? And when I tell them how many years, right, that I have spent just like them in that setting, right? But that there's hope, that there is a way out. But a way out, we talk about the drugs not being a symptom, but there are so many other factors, man, that come into play, right? When a person is trying to get out of, like for myself, that 30-year, cycle, right? There's so many other factors and things, so many things have to line up, right? And we talk about lining up, right? Because everything can line up for you. Everything in the world can line up, but if you aren't willing to put the effort, right, to put the work in that's required behind it, because people, how from Mike Alder says, life is an interview, right? I'll never forget him telling me that life is an interview, people watching you, right? And I get to share that with them people in that prison, man. Yeah. And, and I don't go in there talking about, and I did tell them how I started my day, right? And I saw even the guards in the back. You know what I mean? The first time I went into that, about 5 years ago, the first time that I went into that place that I'm talking about, it's Howard County Detention Center. The first time I went in there, I dressed real nice, right? And I go in there, I get my radio, I get my keys, right? And as I'm walking down this long corridor, I'm having a moment. And I see this guy coming from the other end of the hallway, big 6'4" guy on the suit. He can see who I am before I can see who he is. And he was like, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. So I'm trying to gaze and I ain't opening my mouth. I just keep walking. I had a shade with me, right? And I just professionally try to keep walking. And when I get close enough, I was like, Sergeant Fleury. Right? It was like, but he was the chief of security at this time. But I knew him as Sergeant Fleury from in the House of Correction. And he remembered me as Jack, right? And some other names, right? From in the House of Correction. And what he said to me was so profound, because I talk about life being an interview. He knew I was coming before I even got there to come work, to come help people, tell them, give them some places that will be some communal living, right? And all he kept saying to me was like, I could have never thought your life would turn out like this. And that's just being in there and helping pull, what we call the undesirables out to make them whole again. That was so profound, man. And I shared that with them guys and ladies last night, because it was a co-ed group in the prison. And, a lot of us, man, I know for me, it made it so much easier living around. Because when you got two people together, that's a meeting, right? That's therapy for me, right? Yep. When you got two people who you remember the night we were at Donnelly House and the guy came upstairs. He said, James, let me sit on your face. If he was anywhere else, right, that might have just went over.
That was the end.
But with us, we knew something was wrong, right? We asked him, Mike Elder asked him that night, well, how many pills did you eat? And he said in the high 14s.
Right.
Only us can understand that there's a problem with that. Yeah. Had he been with his parents, right? They might have been just like, oh boy, you drunk, go to
there he is again.
Right, right. So like, think situations like that, man, we always, it's always better when more or better than less, man.
Yeah.
You know, in a living situation.
Yeah, I like to say, the goal is not to be alone.
Right.
Right?
Correct.
My goal is no longer to be all by myself. And
Right,
what's stronger, one man or an army?
Right, exactly.
I want to be part of that.
That's
I want to be part of the group.
Yeah.
And I think, it's something that you do naturally is provide value to the group. Because I think that's something that, is important when you surrender enough to get into a process of recovery. Because as much of what you're talking about, that's what I'm hearing. You're not saying the word surrender, right? You're saying show up and you're always being looked at as what's possible. To me, when I see people, it's not a fight to get into recovery in a new way of life, right? The only one that I ever fought was myself,
for sure.
my mind, really.
Yeah.
My heart wanted a better life for myself. It's my mind that comes up with all this, crazy distractions and thinking and take me here, take me there. And really, most of it is literally just a surrender into this is where I'm at. Let me start from where I'm at. Let me go from here. Let me gather some more information because they told me your best thinking got you here, and that fucking hurt my feelings. That hurt my feelings.
Your best thinking.
I did not like that.
Your best
and I had to go to sleep that night with a lot of embarrassment and a lot of anxiety and realizing that they were absolutely right.
Yeah. You know what happens when because your life has demonstrated and you attract a lot of people. They talked about at your anniversary that the woman that you talked about, her telling you that you were that candle that were going to light 1 million other candles, right? So I'd like to say that you have embraced that as well. One of the things that I have learned, and I'm sure you have as well, after working with so many people, right, trying to help them understand what's best for them when they don't know what's best for them, right? It gets to a point, especially, once we get over a decade clean, right, where sometimes our recovery time has the potential to be a barrier sometimes because we become, to some people, unrelatable.
Sure.
Right? So, that's why I changed my focus, and it happened without my permission. I didn't even know I was doing it, to building other people to be in position to do what we did coming through them places, right?
Yeah.
Okay, man, if you go there, you can eventually be the house manager, you can eventually take a few classes, and you can eventually do this, and eventually one day you say you want what I got, right? And these are the steps that you have to take to get it, right? Are you willing to do that? That's how you pass that structure on. You know what I mean? And that's where I get my joy and beauty from now.
So check this out. They're having a karaoke night at the Tradition House.
I saw
August 4th.
Right, yeah.
I didn't make that flyer.
Right.
I didn't choose that event.
Right.
I didn't know anything about it. And for me, that is one of the most beautiful things that can happen, because exactly what you're saying, right? For a long time, I was the only one who would make dinner for the house meetings, right? Now, everybody makes dinner, right? And the fact, I used to make flyers. I love making flyers. I used to make flyers, like the one creative thing that I could do. And now this next group has stepped up, and they're their own thing. And of course, I'm a product of the same thing, right? The information that I share is all information that I gathered from the people that came before me in the same way.
I agree.
And what a beautiful thing is when you get better in life, and this doesn't even have to be an addict thing. When you get better in life, you want to share that with others.
Absolutely.
Right? When you get strong enough to carry yourself, you naturally want to help carry other people.
Yeah, that's right.
So I wanted to shift now to gratitude, if we can. Where do you think your gratitude practice started? Do you have a formal practice of gratitude? And how does that relate to you and your happiness?
I love the question. I love the several parts of it. I do not intentionally have a formal practice, right? For me, my gratitude starts the moment that I open my eyes. So maybe I do have a particular practice, right? The moment I open my eyes, right? You talked about this amazing life. I'm just going to go with how I express my gratitude today.
Please.
Right. I woke up in my house, right, with my wife, right, got out of our bed, went to the kitchen, fixed a pot of coffee, right? Grabbed my readings, and I went out onto the deck, right? And when it's this time of year, I go out onto that deck, man, and I do this, right? I breathe in that air, and then I look at all the beautiful flowers our friends have given us over the years, right? And that's where my gratitude practice starts, right? And I say, this is going to be a great day. I do my little spiritual readings and things, man. And then there's something about when we first started this out, we talked about I talked about it, how things kept lining up. The right people kept being put in the right place to make sure that I got the next right thing or place to go to. So that's kind of like how I model my day. Like when I pray, I say, put me in the position to help somebody today. Because, man, if they could see if they could have a life beyond their wildest dreams, right? And we have a formula for it. So my gratitude presents itself, right? Because we had this thing when we say my gratitude speaks when I care and I share with other people, right? Right. That's right. Okay, good. Because it's fitting, right? All those years that I was in the street that I thought when them periods of time that I got hood rich, had a car, all that stuff, none of it compares to how I'm living today without fear of the stick-up boys or the police coming, right? Yeah. I live an amazing life, and a lot of people who suffered like I suffered believe that they had made such a mess of their lives that none of this could be possible for them. I was grateful in the beginning of my recovery that I finished an entire tube of toothpaste. I was grateful that I finished an entire speed stick. I was grateful, right, that because I never had. I never was able to sit still. It was either an abandoned building, a jail cell getting tossed or something. Wherever it was, I never got to finish those things. So I got in touch with gratitude from the beginning. Things that I'm grateful for, right? I was putting on weight. I was eating meals. In the beginning, Martin, I worked in a restaurant, P.F. Chang's, right? I made enough money to pay my rent, catch the bus, and buy 2 packs of cigarettes a week, period. And I was so grateful. You couldn't tell me that,
And I think it really is important to point that out, because for somebody to look at you today, it would seem like obvious. Well, of course, Jack has a house. Right? But to know you when I met you, where it was like, I got to figure out how to pay back this money.
Because in that,
And I think you had just gotten the job at P.F. Chang's from McDonald's?
No, from Pelican Mills Brewery.
That's right, Jerry. So the steps, and to me, the steps that you have followed in order to allow your life to come together and just have been in the process, right? Because that's all you were. Mm-hmm. There was no clear indication that life was going to turn out great. And you just stayed in the process every day, and you hung on to that gratitude every single day. And I think it's so important, especially when I have people on here, because we're on here, we look great and we're happy, we have this knowledge, but every single one of us started off in the same place, broken, having basically given up, lost everything. There was no obvious path, but we just took the suggestions in front of us and stayed in position. And I think that should give people a lot of hope to know that you came from a place that
nothingness, where there was nothing,
shot multiple times.
Shot up, beat up, stabbed up, incarcerated, kidnapped, living in an abandoned building. All that stuff was my story. In houses, freezing cold, that I don't own, with candles, all that stuff. That's where, shitting in buckets, things like that, throwing it out the back door, hoping on nobody sees and call the police. Right, that type of stuff, the degradation, the years of being incarcerated, the years of calling my parents saying, you locked up again, huh? Good, that's where your ass need to be, quick. That type of stuff. You ain't gonna never be nothing, that type of stuff. to buying into the process, man. You kept saying the process, right? And one of the words that I like to use is trusting the process. When I was able to start trusting it, all right, and seeing the miracle, this is what happens around here for me, right? Because I talked about the toothpaste and deodorant and stuff, right, and the eating and stuff like that. You get to see the miracle happen not only with yourself, right? But what happens when you stick around here, you get to see what happens when people don't trust the process, right? And say, you know, even in the communal living, you see it all the time. People packing their stuff up and don't, you know.
I want to say probably more often than not.
Right, exactly. You know, and don't be like, oh man, it isn't so, you know, because I've been that person before recovery where I come off a long bit and go to a halfway house, right, where it wasn't recovery structured, right, where I was always the person that would use. Always. Soon as you let me out of there, I'm going to get one.
Were those halfway houses, or was that like in Oxford? Where did you go?
They were halfway. There was Dismas House East, Dismas House West. They said, you know, Fairmount House. It was just houses connected
Specifically
for prison, for coming out of prison.
So what's funny too, and I think this is worth mentioning, so people hear this. When we were getting into a halfway house, that's all they called it, whether it was a jail.
Right.
And typically that's where the term comes from. Halfway house is halfway from jail. Yep. And when we were coming out, you didn't call them a recovery house. Okay. There was no real term for that. They were still halfway houses. I remember how much that terrified me. Yeah. I just wanted to mention that. So you were in real halfway houses, and those do serve. There are some really great ones. They serve a really important piece of the puzzle for people trying to reintegrate and actually get back in.
For people.
Yeah.
I watched. And you know, we hear some things around here, right? And one of them that I related to the last time at Dismas House East, right? It was the year that you remember that song, It's Time for the Percolate. It's time for the percolate. Right?
Yeah.
They had they were selling a big ass dumb pill full of dope called Percolator, right? And I heard about it in Jessup.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to get to Caroline Street.
Right.
3 days blackout and I'm going to get that percolator, right?
You've been that guy.
Right. I'm going to use, right? Yeah. But what happened, I related this to, when somebody expressed to me, I heard it probably in church, and you know, don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle, right? Trust the process, right? Because like, okay, yeah, you got 10 extra oodles of noodles, you're gonna use this whole tube of toothpaste, your bus fare, you done managed to put up a month's worth of, you know, things are getting better, right? I see it all the time where people stop trusting the process and think that that's as far as they need to go. And it's gonna keep getting better or something. But once you stop putting in the work, because I've been able to watch other people leave before the miracle happens, right? The blessings stop coming. Yeah. Right, the blessings stop coming.
I'll even say it like this, at least from my life, and I've seen this in many others, all of the gifts are on the other side of uncomfortability.
Absolutely.
So it seems like every breakthrough, actually, I'll say it like this, because this is the truth. Every major breakthrough I've ever had in my life, in recovery, has had not just difficulties and hard times, but also the opportunity to use.
Right.
Handed to me. Right? Like OxyContin. So I got that house on Jacob's Ladder that I think we've mentioned on the show already, but I got that house and I had to clean it out. Well, that house was raided by the DEA at one point from the previous owners. And sure enough, I had brought people into the house with me to make sure that if there were drugs that we would find it. We did. We found it. We flushed it together. And then I found some Oxy. And that Oxy went right in my pocket. And I was probably, I don't know, 4 years clean, something like that at that time. I don't remember exactly. But, that shit went right in my pocket. And I carried it around for the next 2 days and obsessively thought about it. And thank God I threw it out the window. Right? And that breakthrough then allowed me to live the next huge chapter of my life. When we moved into this house, I bought this from an older lady. She had a box full of pills. I mean, a box full of like prescriptions that she wasn't taking. I mean, a crazy amount of drugs. If I was trying to use, it was all there for me. And this is how, this has been the biggest blessing I've gotten.
Yes, indeed.
That's not true, but It's a beautiful house.
Yeah.
It's a huge blessing. But there's been all of these, even at career points. It's like when I was getting into my partnership, right, with real estate, I was literally in a house that was it was a foreclosure. There was pills in the cabinet. I was all by myself in the cabinet of the house. I could have gone back to using. Instead, I got into a real estate partnership that allowed me to sell hundreds of homes. Right. So like every chance I've had, I've been going through an emotional difficulty. I'm presented with the opportunity to choose that old way of life. And instead I get to break through into another thing. And I just think that's maybe just part of the makeup of reality.
I have a question for you, if it's okay.
Sure.
How do you start your day?
So I start my day with breath work. I do have a practice of meditation. Breath with Sandy, shout out, my fellow YouTuber. He's actually famous. He's great though. Breath with Sandy. Actually, I'll add a link to this channel in the description because it's fantastic. He does pranayamic breathing, breath of fire. That breath work is literally how I restart my day too. So when I was working 12, 14-hour days every single day, the way I would get through those long days is I would stop, I'd take a 10-minute break, and I would do breath work.
So I knew the answer to that question, right? As well as some other things that you do. But the semblance I'm trying to draw is that you keep your spiritual conditioning in the place, right? So that when opportunity meets desire, like when them two meet up in the same room, you better have some coping skills, right? Because a person who is used to just fixing every feeling with something outside, a substance or food or something like that, it makes it real easy when opportunity and desire meet in the same room, right? So when this is why we don't just take some of the suggestions around here, right? For the most part, we do everything that we're told by our predecessors and even some newcomers, right? Because I already know what happens when a person's spirit isn't in the right place, right? And opportunity and desire meet the same room.
For sure.
There you go, right?
For sure.
So,
you got to fill up the spiritual bank account if you want to make some withdrawals when times are tough. Yeah. So did you ever have a period in your recovery when you were like clean and crazy? Did you have some bad habits or some ways that you acted out while you were still clean?
I almost want to say no, And that will be an honest answer. For probably 10 years, I was so vigilant, right? I was, because I came in my mind from a different place. I know it ain't no different than where anyone else came from. Baltimore City is 20 minutes from Columbia, 30 minutes, right? I understood the work that I had to do out the gate. So like, I didn't allow myself too much. It's kind of like I didn't allow myself to get into vices.
Yeah.
Into too many, right, on myself, right? Into too much uncomfortable stuff, right? I didn't go to bars. I didn't go to strip clubs. I see newcomers today, they're going to strip clubs and partying and everything, going to shows and stuff like that. I kept myself, to use your words, on a short leash. I got busy with doing the necessary programmatic change, right, that I had to do. So what that kept me doing was fellowshipping, because I was living in communal living, and it seemed like it was always something to do with the guys in the house, something. It wasn't but go to, like you said, when you first got here, what y'all doing? All right, that's what I'm doing to you.
Yep. So I don't need to figure it out. I just got to do everybody else.
So that's exactly
specifically Jack. Right. Where's Jack's home group? I'm going to go to that group. Right.
So that was the story of my life, right? Now, that doesn't mean that my disease haven't showed up since I've been here. The first time I tried to stop smoking cigarettes, I had that same Sebring. I had just got it, actually. I had a patch, a nicotine patch on, I had lozenges, chewing gum, and I had a vape. So I was on the phone with the insurance company in the house, right? She said, well, she needed something, like the title or something. So I ran out to the car. And I thought I threw all my cigarettes away, but I opened the console and there was one Newport. Like it jumped out into my hand, right? Yeah. Now, mind you, the car had tags on it, but the sticker was 5 years dead. I started the car, drove down to the shopping center right behind the house, right?
Guilt and shame.
Right? and I picked this cigarette up, and I was about to light it.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't, and I didn't light it that day, and I didn't stop smoking them. But that was my deep disease wanting me to check out. Right. So I haven't struggled with a lot since I've been here because I've maintained so much vigilance. And I'm glad I have because, like I said, I'm always the one to use. Yeah. When I know that, I'm able to keep myself spiritually in a good place and not listen to the outside chatter that can bring me back into my defective being, right? Yeah. It's real. It can happen subtly, like you used the word, right?
Yeah.
You
have made it through a lot. It has been a lot of
deaths. Deaths. We had service for my sister tomorrow morning. Spiritually, I'm going to be spiritually fit. I try to keep myself that way, right? But yeah, I've been through a lot, but, once again, the same way that I listened to people when I first got here, the reason they tell you to learn how to listen to learn, because if you stay in the process of recovery long enough, you'll get a turn, right, at whatever you've heard other people share, right? Deaths, loss of jobs, loss of relationships, loss of whatever, right? Yeah. And the object is to hear how they got through it without picking up, right? So so I've had struggles, major struggles, no behavior struggles for the most part, right? I always say the biggest one with people, usually a lot of people that I get to work with is, and I see it all the time, like they, we get clean, hormones begin to regenerate and everybody wants a girl. So when you hear me telling my story, I always say I stayed by myself for 4 years straight and learned how to build a relationship with Jack, right? Yeah. There were so many opportunities, right, for me to act out. But once again, I used to tell my sponsor, oh man, she sent me naked pictures in my inbox. And my sponsor said something to me one day, because my story was I would come home from prison, right? People would put me on with the drugs. I'd get a lot of money, right? And I would get a girl, right? And we'd end up in the hotel. And when I come out the hotel, I got the needle back. That was my story. So it was easy for me to put them two together in recovery. So it was something that I could abstain from and have a purpose for doing it. That didn't mean that I didn't want a woman.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wanted her, but it was more important for me to get this new way of life, right? To satisfy just, a carnal desire. Yeah. You know what I mean? And thank God, man.
It served you. And it can serve you the rest of your life.
For sure. And
others.
Yeah, absolutely. And because when I share my experience with somebody, right, it helps them with their experience and where they're headed to, So, when I'm doing the right thing for the right reason, I pretty much stay stress-free, right? You talked about the life that I have. That's amazing,
Yeah, tell us what you do for fun, too.
Well, what I do for fun today is, I do a lot of yard work, which is fun for me. I have a friend right there who has a swimming pool who allows me to come swim when I want. I go to the gym regularly.
Big gym user.
Big gym
obviously.
User, right,
doing something right there.
Right, I'm learning a new way of eating, which is fun, right? Christina offered me a bagel when I came, and I was like, as much as I'm looking.
She's trying to get rid of it because we don't want to eat it.
Right. Like I'm bringing cakes over here. Here, eat that up.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of things for fun. Believe it or not, going to meetings and socializing and going to events that, Gratitude Foundation puts on. Those are the things that I do for fun. Travel. We do a lot of traveling. I love to travel, which is something that I could have not imagined, get to travel with friends. We go to different places that that I've never been or maybe have been, but in a different capacity, right?
Conventions.
Work, conventions, it's just so many things that I do for fun, man. Fun for me is sitting in the house enjoying my home, watching a movie with my wife, you know what I mean? We watched One Love last night after a long week's work, right? We'll finally watch Bob Marley, One Love,
Is that a new documentary?
It's the movie. That? No, it's just in the movies.
Okay.
It's a story about his life. Yeah,
nice. I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's on either Amazon Prime or Netflix. On Amazon Prime. It's a great movie.
Awesome.
I only fell asleep on the last 5 minutes. But yeah, so there's a lot of things I do for fun. Some of the, if I allow myself to not say the things that I do for fun, because that list will go on and on and on and on and on, right? If I allow myself to sit here and keep talking about, I have a million things that I do for fun, right?
And I think the other key there too is that you're a lifelong learner. And maybe you don't use that word for it, but I think that should probably be a key that I keep trying to mention here on the show, because people that are interested in life and find interesting things to pursue will always enjoy their life. Yeah. There's always more to enjoy. Yeah. I just got seeds on one of the first episodes. I got a bunch of zucchinis growing now.
Wow, look at that.
And if you don't know how to do something and you're not afraid of change and you're not afraid of learning or putting yourself in a position where you're the one asking for help to learn something, life is endlessly interesting.
Man, absolutely. So the hobbies and things like that. When I first came into recovery, I didn't know my favorite color. I didn't know what I liked to do, who I liked, or whatever like that. I've learned how today to figure myself out, what I like, and there's something about what I like and what I don't like, and I'm able to participate in things without fear of, if I don't like something, they not gonna like me. I'm able to stand on what I don't like and allow other people to like what they like, and agree with differences. It's something about coming into this new way of life, right, with no clear path of where it's taking me. But, understanding all along the ways, I'm about to be in my 13th year, right? And every one of those years, like these lines on this table, man, has a point where I say, okay, I shattered another ceiling, right? And it's all because I stayed around the right people, right? And the right people kept propelling me towards, like at the top of that triangle where it says freedom, woo! There's still, and I still believe that the triangle, because my base gets broader, the triangle continues to go higher and higher, man. It's still a lot more freedom, to be had. I just get free in different areas, man, and it's a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing.
So tell us, before we wrap up, if you want to, about the company that you work for. And I think part of that I'm looking for is really like, why do you work for that?
Well, let's go with because I have 2 full-time jobs. Let's go with the first one. Let's go with Turk House, right? An amazing organization. We have an amazing executive director. And when I say that not because he's the director, because I see how much he genuinely wants to help people like me, right? Because I came through there as a client, right? Yeah. So I work for their facility that's in Howard County, right? Which I came through in August the 28th or 29th of 2011 as a client. I've been working there. I looked at it on my thing today. I've been working there for the past 10 years and 4 months. Why do I work there? I came to there, and that place, like everything else, it was one of them notches in this board right here. It was one of them places, communal living, that taught me structure over again, gave me accountability, put me in a position of leadership there. People were watching me. I love what they made me. I know what they did for my life, right? And how they gave me an opportunity to come back and sit in there and work there and give right back what was so freely given to me, right? It makes a lot more sense when I'm doing a group there and I'm telling them guys, look, I sat in that seat just like you did. I did everything that they told me to do, just like I'm asking you to do it. And I get to share with them what happens when you don't take these suggestions. And I get to our friend Bobby, Bobby Taylor, when he first got there, right? We had our, and it's always like this, right? And we laugh about it today. Our first interaction it's funny because he worked with someone there. I come down in the kitchen in the morning, after a certain period of time, he got on pajama pants. I said, hey, my man, you need to go take them pajama pants off. Wow, I ain't see it in the rule book, So fast forward, right? He's celebrating 3 years last week because he works his employee summit. He called me a month ago. He's 6 o'clock in the morning. He said, "You ain't gonna believe this." Right. It then come full circle. I had my first experience with telling somebody they couldn't wear their pajama pants. That's why I do it. Right. I get to see the miracle happen over and over and over again. I heard somebody say this years ago, right? And I'm sure you have, and I'm sure our viewers have, right? If you find something you love doing, you'll never work another day in your life.
Yeah.
Right? And I love doing what I do, man. Yeah. You know, the Howard House, you know, the Turk House, Howard House facility, right, has been a blessing to me, right? And I've been placed in a position of leadership there as well, right? So people will say, well, why do you have this second job, right? Well, it's kind of like early recovery, where when I was at the brewery and then got the PF Chang's, I was afraid to let one go. For fear that, what if this don't work out, right? But now I keep both for different reasons. It's manageable, right? You know, I'll never forget getting that job, a government job. And how about this? I got another year and I'm vested with a government pension, right? We started this conversation out talking about the years that I've spent behind bars in the penal system, right? You know, I wouldn't have ever thought that I would end up with a government pension and all the other blessings that recovery has bestowed, right? Full circle. So it also gives me an opportunity, man, to take back what I've been given into the places that kept me trapped for so many years. You know, the jails, the treatment centers, you know, the hospitals. I managed a group of 11 peers, right? It's funny because last week was fiscal, you know, the year-end fiscal stuff, that we had. And the amount of budget, the money that's in the budgets of the programs that I manage, needle exchange, high school peer support, emergency room peer support, addiction groups in the detention center, you know, and the list goes on. Street outreach, we just started that program. We got our friend Carrie working there. You know, so it just, you know, once again, with me just practicing humility, being humble and being the hard worker that I was in my life, trusting the process. My father used to tell me, my father had to tell me one time how to cut the grass, right? And every time after that, my work ethic, he didn't even have to check. And that's the integrity that I've built with both of the institutions that I work with today. My integrity and people knowing, because I've understood the interview process, right? People watching, and not just the administration that's above me, but the people that I'm charged with helping, right? And when I'm able to have full disclosure, right? It's something about when a job gives you full disclosure, knowing where you come from. You can't go on Social Security and say, "Oh yeah, I was locked up 19 years and shot dope for 30 years, but here I am." Where I'm at, I can do that. You know, so full disclosure, and it helps me to meet the participants right where they're at. And have them believe and trust in the process just like I did, because they trust me. There's a level of trust with me because I don't come in the room like I did at that training school with my chest stuck out wanting to see who I got to fight tonight. I come in the room with peace. I meet them with love, right? And some of us, man, showing up, man, we haven't had that type of greeting in forever. It was always, "What do you want?" You know, "No, get out," that type of stuff. When we're inviting people into our hearts and our homes, you know. Me and my wife and I, we have a home and we rent 3 rooms out. So I had one of my, we had to cook out.
We have someone in recovery who lives here with us too.
I know. So one of my roommates, Rob, you know, he, had been asking me recently, can this particular gentleman, right, that he sponsors come over and do step work? And I kept saying, nah, because he was my client at the place, right? And when he gets a year, then we can revisit it, you know. So the other night, I sent them a text, and it just came out of my mind. I was just like, I said, "Oh yeah, and that question about that particular individual coming by to do step work, it's okay, man." You know, and that individual was also allowed to come to our yearly cookout 2 weeks ago, right? And this is a guy that did my groups at the detention center. I got him out of it. I'm gonna say his name, John. And I went there and met him. Bill referred me to come see him, interviewed him, got him in the house. He went through his stuff. Now he's in transitional living. And when he gets to, he's already seen how I live my life, right?
Yeah.
But then when he come and see that, right, you know, because we got a beautiful home and a nice, peaceful place, man, it lets him know that, look, man, you just like me, right? Don't limit yourself. The world is like an oyster, man. We get clean, we can do anything and get anything, right? But you got to keep that gratitude, right, and that hunger for more, right? Not just more stuff, but wanting to be spiritually better and able to reach and help more people. You know?
So great to have you on here.
It's been great to be here.
So is there anything else? I mean, usually what I close with is if you want to give any advice to somebody who's thinking about getting into communal living. I think you've given a ton of great advice while we've been on the show here.
I think we both have as well. You know, some of the keys that I had to take them out of is trust in the process, believe in yourself, right? My man James L. told me, he shared it in a meeting, but he said, Jack, do something good for yourself today. You couldn't do it for a better person. Right.
Say that to myself all the time because of your story. Say it to myself.
So if I do that every morning, do something good for yourself today. If it ain't go to the gym, drink a protein shake, take your vitamins, right? Call your sponsor, whatever it is, right? Do something good for yourself. Do something good for yourself. Help somebody, right? Share your experiences, right? Share your experience, your strength, and your hope, right? Because if it's coming from the right place, it's going to reach the right place, you know. So in closing, I'd like to thank Gratitude Foundation, right, for all that they do, right, for all the gratitude that they show in helping people, you know, the events that you put on, you know, for anybody, and, you know, to show up and participate, man. You know, I aspire to be like you one day.
Well, Jack is a board member of the Gratitude Foundation, like myself, and we're definitely lucky to have you. And I didn't open with that mainly because that's not why you're on here, right? You're on here because of your real lived experience. It's been a pleasure. I hope everybody got something out of that, like I did. And with that, I'll just close. The opinions that are expressed here are that of our own, and please go to gratitudefoundation.com if you get a chance. We are .com. .org is a different group. And I'm excited to say we actually have a new website that should be published by the time this episode is coming out that we've been working on. I'm very excited about that. Also, Gratitude Speaks is now on every podcast platform that you can find.
Nice.
We have our clips on TikTok. I'm saying not a regular TikTok user, but on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, on LinkedIn, just about everywhere. And we're spreading the word. So if you can do us a favor, if you made it this far, you obviously are getting something out of the content that we're putting out there. Please share it with at least one person that you feel like would benefit from it. And with that, we'll close.
Thanks.
See y'all.